We all have one. You know, that special bottle of wine you're saving for a birthday, an anniversary, or any special event. Or maybe you just don't know whether it's ready to drink, so you're afraid to pop the cork. Well, what if I told you you don't have to wait any longer? You can try that bottle without any risk of it going bad or without the risk of trying it too early and wasting the rest of the bottle. In today's episode, we are chatting to hear from Coravin inventor Greg Lambrecht, and he's going to share with you exactly how to use this tool to completely transform your wine experience. So stay tuned. Welcome to Everyday Sommelier, where we make learning about wine approachable, fun, and something you can actually enjoy. I'm your host, Christy Mayfield. Think of me as your sommelier next door, here to help you cut through the complexity so you can enjoy every glass with confidence and learn wine your way. I don't personally have a wine collection to rival even a beginner collection. I've picked up bottles through my travels and experiences that I'm holding on to, either for aging purposes or special occasions. But the truth of the matter is, they're wines I don't want to pop the cork on and drink all in one night. They're ones I'd prefer to enjoy a little bit here, a little bit there. Wine, however, does not fit into the mold for this type of experience. So I've either left those bottles to age a little bit longer, or I've ended up in the sad situation where a portion of that beautiful bottle simply goes bad and goes down the drain. Think about the last time you stood in front of a wine rack, either at your own house or at a wine shop, and you see that special bottle, the one you've been saving, and you want a glass of it immediately. But of course, you're not ready to do that. You're afraid it's going to go bad if you pop the cork. And in this feeling of hesitation, this fear of potential waste, you're unsure what to do next. Well, today's guest is not only an engineer, he's an innovator. He looked at this same problem, and instead of accepting it, he chose to solve it. Today, I'm excited to welcome Greg Lambrecht, the founder of Coravin. And Greg, most of your interviews start by people asking you how your medical background inspired your development of the Coravin. But I want to start off a different direction with the why. You were doing all of this innovation in the medical arena, life-saving, life-altering work, but there had to be a personal moment with why you switched to wine.
Thanks for having me on, Kristen. I'm lucky to have entered the world of wine by addressing my own problem. And it was very similar to what you were describing. I had all these different bottles that looked delicious, but the only way I was going to find out was by pulling the cork and finding out. And there were two problems with that. One, I work in medicine, and so frequently in surgery, you really don't want to be drinking a whole bottle by yourself. My wife at the time really didn't drink very much. And so I was always dealing with bottles of wine that went bad. And then the other thing was that I didn't know if the wine was ready. So, you've got these bottles of wine and people tell you, oh, it's not ready yet. Give it a couple of years. So there's a drinking window. And I wanted to understand what a wine tasted like when it was too young, what a wine tasted like when it was just right, and when it was too old. I was frustrated that, unlike almost everything else that is sold to you as a beverage, wine is sold to you in a multi-serving container and has a very short half-life once you open it. And so, I was thinking my dad was a type 1 diabetic. He was injecting himself with insulin throughout my entire childhood. And then there were two different medical devices that I developed that involved needles. So I was really good at needles. So the technological capability was there to solve the problem. I think the key was my growing frustration that this beverage that I love so much, wine, was one that I could only explore in a volume that they sold it to me. That was great when friends came over, but made no sense when I was on my own. And I think that made me realize, hey, there are all of these situations where I would love to have a glass of wine, but I'm not, because it means opening a whole bottle. So there were all these times during the week where I just skipped having a glass of wine, even if it would have been perfect. Because, I felt like so wasteful to drink one glass, put it in the fridge, and then come back to it a couple of days later and find it had gone off. So, it's a wonderful thing. It's been with us for 8,000 years, but I was frustrated this container was not the container that I would consume. I didn't want all of it.
That is a very common scenario around my house. Being in the wine world, I often want to have a glass when I sit down in the evening as my way of relaxing and celebrating the day.
Yeah.
And I'm quite certain that you, our listener, many of you are thinking the same thing. The challenge obviously started with the technological side of things. And I'd like to fast forward. There's some amazing videos of you with your prototype. Can you walk us through when you first created a working, I'll call it a Coravin. You might not want to call it a Coravin back at that time.
It was
And
called Wine Mosquito back then.
that's
We've
that's
gotten better at naming.
Yes. And you shared it with some friends, but let's talk about this tradition around wine. Not a lot changes over time in the world of technology. So you created something game changing with the Corvin. And how did this, in the world where the cork is king and pulling that cork is part of the experience, how did you convince people that that part of the tradition, that experience could still result in a fabulous wine experience without the cork being pulled and the clock starting to tick on that bottle that they pulled the cork out of?
It's a really important question because it involved a lot of time and thought. We were very cautious about the launch of Coravin. I have to admit that the number one driver was the positivity of the change. I still pull corks. I pull corks on every bottle that I drink because I don't want to waste the gas on the last glass, right? But I'm rarely pulling corks on a full bottle. I've already had a glass or two, or my spouse and I want to have the same bottle, and we've got half a bottle of it left that we Coravined over the last 6 months to a year. So I'm still pulling corks. I still have that experience with every bottle. I just don't have it every glass that I have. And the benefits of that, of what I was experiencing at home, were huge. It went beyond the I'd like to taste this or I want a glass of this to I can now pair a white and a red and a dessert wine. I can now try half a glass of 5 different wines from around the world. I can, explore. I bought 12 different vintages of the same wine. I could try a taste of each one side by side. I could show them to friends. When friends came over, I was pouring them whatever they wanted, not just what I had open or what I was willing to open. So I knew that there was a really positive outcome. I'm not a zealot saying you've got to pour everything through Coravin, pull the cork on bottles. Sure, I do that all the time still. Full bottles when I have friends over, and there are all these situations where that tradition still makes a lot of sense, but there's a pile of times when it doesn't. To convince people that there's two types of skepticism. There's cultural, actually three: cultural skepticism, there's efficacy skepticism. Does it work? Cultural, what are you doing messing with my culture of pulling the cork and drinking the whole bottle? Of course you can drink a whole bottle, right? And then the third one was cost, economic. So you got the efficacy, the economic, and you've got the cultural resistance. From an efficacy perspective, we were very conscious of this. We use Coravin on somebody else's wonderful product, right? They made their wine and we use our Coravin on it. And we're claiming that wine is going to be the same a year later, however long later, after it's been Coravined. I didn't want winemakers seeing their wine for the first time under Coravin out in the field and go, what the heck is that? So we ran these really big efficacy tests, right? Where we went around proving to winemakers and sommelier around the world and wine critics and wine writers that Coravin worked. We would gather them together in whatever city or winemaking region with their wines. They would Coravin half of the bottles of a case, and we'd come back and blind taste them 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, even later with the Burgundians and the Napa Valley guys. And they could experience themselves the lack of an impact that Coravin had on the wine. They knew that it worked. So we did that with over 700 wine professionals and piles of different wines all over the world. So that was the efficacy side. And we still do it. We still do blind tastings with natural wines, for example. We just did one in New York with a bunch of sommelier and a pile of natural wines, Coravin at different times. We did it with every system we launched, so sparkling and pivot, as well as with timeless. But then there's the cultural resistance. And that is, the hope is that if you can convert the winemaker, that the sommelier will come along. That hope was only partially realized. And the beautiful thing about it was, for me personally, to see how differently each culture responded to Coravin. The French are very different from the Americans. The Australians are very different from the French. And the The Brits are very different from the Italians. And so, even within a country like the United States, for example, New York is much more conservative than San Francisco or Los Angeles. And so, you got to see, for example, in Napa Valley, people accepted it right away, super fast. And New York, much more conservative. Australia, one of our best countries. They don't have a tradition they're not willing to break. So they were like, great, we can drink by the glass. This is awesome. France, Paris, extremely conservative. Bordeaux, very conservative. Burgundy, wide open, like excited to try something new. Wonderful. Champagne, very much like Burgundy. They accepted Coravin sparkling very, very quickly. So, to overcome that cultural resistance, honestly, it's the culture determines how much work you have to put into it. And then it's really time. Coravin had to survive, right? We had to survive on the Australia, on the United Kingdom, on Burgundy, on California, in order to give places like New York and Paris and Bordeaux time to adapt. I don't know that you can push a culture, but you can convince them it works. That changing of behavior was the hardest part and the most challenging and fun part of the whole experience.
I hadn't thought about just the cultural differences in embracing the technology from culture by culture. In my mind, one of the, I'll call it a cultural difference that I can see being a different perspective, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is the on-premise or say restaurant culture, whether or not they're embracing it as quickly versus we talked a lot up front, you being a consumer, me being a consumer, and where this can fit into our wine journey. But can you talk about that cultural difference as well from the on premise, whether restaurants might have been slower or even faster? In a previous episode, I talked about the Buy the Glass program. We do see a lot of, sadly, restaurant waste in wine if only
Right.
one person orders that glass of wine out of that bottle before it goes bad. But I'd love to get your perspective, especially for our listener, as to how this could potentially be a game changer in both of those scenarios.
It is really important. We have lots of different types of customers. We've got the winemaker, we've got distributors and importers, we've got the consumer at home, we have wine educators who use Coravin, and then there is the trade, restaurants and wine bars. I was convinced that restaurants and wine bars would pick it up so fast because the benefit to them is so economically clear. Not only eliminating waste, but when you eliminate waste, you also open up the opportunity to sell a better glass of wine. So instead of putting a $12 wholesale bottle of wine on your buy the glass list because you're willing to throw it out if it goes bad, you can serve. I mean, we have people serve a €1,000 glass of wine in Germany, for example, a glass of DRC, Domaine Romani Conti, or whatever, right? I thought it was so obvious. And for some it was. Joe Bastianich very early on with Del Posto was very quick. A lot of restaurants in California were very quick, but it was very much like that cultural thing. Believe that most restaurants are founded around a chef and that chef's dream of what they want their restaurant to be. And the very little business education goes on in the quartermaster sommeliers until recently, right? There was a lot of art appreciation approach to wine service and wine lists there's an economic impact, right? Beverage is where restaurants make all their money, and by the glass is 50% of the wine sales. And in terms of revenue. So it's a really important part of the business. I was shocked to find how little economic and business education there was in restaurants. And as a result, the resistance was identical to the cultural resistance. So New York was much more conservative than California in the restaurant. Italy was wide open. We're in so many restaurants in Italy. They got it very quickly. But France, much more conservative. Australia, we're in every restaurant. So there's very much a cultural difference. The one place where the economics was understood very quickly were chain restaurants. So, for example, in the United States, Capital Grille. Capital Grille adopted Coravin wholesale across the entire business because they saw the economic impact. We've taken to doing tests with restaurants now as a concerted effort to convince people by studying their wine sales before we put Coravin in, study their wine sales after. And the impact on revenue is dramatic. We just try to convince them to put 5 glasses they would not put on their buy the glass list. On their buy the glass, using Coravin, either because they feared people wouldn't understand it or the price was too high from their perspective on the by the glass. And what they've seen is waste plummet and revenue go up. And I think ultimately customer is happier because they have access to better wines by the glass. They don't have to get a bad wine by the glass or pay too much for a bottle that they're not going to finish. So from a customer choice perspective, I'm hoping that battle wins out. We're seeing more and more traction in restaurants as time goes on.
The trajectory that Coravin is on in that regard is very game changing to me. No, personally, when a new restaurant opens, I go to their website and I look at their wine list. Now, call me a wine snob, but that's what I do. And I get excited about something, but then I see it's only by the bottle. And a lot of times that's great. But when my husband and I are on different spectrums and I want a white wine, he wants a red wine, it does seem limiting because a lot of our by the glass programs aren't nearly as exciting as the by the bottle. So adopting as a restaurateur a Coravin program, and even if it's a rotating few glasses, what I'm hearing you say is that is really driving not only customer response in a positive way, it's driving bottom line profitability in a really significant way.
Absolutely. Every restaurant where we've tested this, and I think we're up to 16 to 20 restaurants around the world that we've done this test, every single one has seen a dramatic increase in their revenue. I equate that to customer happiness and customer satisfaction. People are buying a great glass. They know it's in good shape because they see it on the Coravin by the glass list. And it's a wine they would not have otherwise been able to access under the normal by the glass list without Coravin. And that is particularly true now with sparkling. Restaurants were loath to serve more than one or two sparkling wines by the glass because they not only oxidize, they go flat. And every customer can tell a flat glass, and they don't want to pay a lot of money for a flat glass of champagne, but everybody wants a great glass of champagne, particularly as a first glass. The ease of use and the clarity of need with sparkling wine in restaurants has really been a big door opener for Coravin in general. People, when I pitch to a restaurant, I say, okay, so here's Coravin Sparkling, and you can now serve any champagne you want by the glass. And oh, by the way, there's this thing called Timeless and Pivot that can serve your still wines by the glass. So that freedom, I am the same as you. I look at the by the glass list and the wine list at every restaurant before I go because it matters to me. Right? And then to have the freedom to be able to pair different glasses with different courses without having to finish the first bottle before you go to the second bottle, right? That's something as I get older, I do less and less, and I'd much rather go by the glass.
Taking that same concept from a wine enthusiast or consumer perspective, how do you help, let's say you, our listener, how can Coravin be part of your journey? One, looking at just the trends in lower consumption. Two, we are seeing the statistics telling us that people are investing more when they do buy a bottle of wine. So we're seeing that price elevation towards, and I don't want to equate price and quality, but they're investing more in a bottle of wine. And then to the point of that fear or the anxiety around popping the cork because you don't want to drink it all. And if you come back to it 3 days later, it's not the same experience. But at the same time, when you just take the price tag of a Coravin, you say, oh gosh, am I going to get my value out of it? Greg, what would you say to our listener who may have had that experience around the product?
Yeah, well, so I think about the cost of the system. It's a one-time investment plus the gas. The gas, if you use it appropriately in Timeless, you're paying 25 cents a glass, 30 cents a glass. So winds up being relatively inexpensive to use. And go to our website to see how to use it most efficiently. So it's a one-time investment. What does that investment bring? It's not the wine that you don't throw away. A lot of people think about Coravin as a wine preservation system. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as a freedom, the freedom that you have to taste and drink whatever you want in the quantity you want. That freedom is the value of Coravin. And when I think about, I had a really good friend who said, I use Coravin all the time. And I said, what do you use it on? He goes, well, I used to think that there are very few days that are worth opening this bottle of wine. Like, this is a great bottle of wine. There are very few days where I'm like, today is the perfect day to commit to this bottle. He goes, Every day is worth a great glass. And a great glass might mean an expensive bottle of wine. It might mean a rare bottle of wine. It might mean an older bottle of wine. It might mean a bottle of wine that you purchased with your spouse on a trip and you just want to try a taste. Every day is worth a great glass of wine. And I think that also comes with drinking more intentionally. If you're going to be drinking a glass of wine, it might as well be the perfect wine. More and more, what I'm doing at home, my wonderful spouse Jennifer, she's an expert in Italian wines. More and more, what I do at home is she'll be cooking, and I'm her sommelier, and so I'm going through 5 different Barolo or 5 different Barbaresco or 5 different Sicilian wines and tasting her on them, and she'll go, that one. That's the one that we have with dinner. Let's have a glass. Each of us have a glass of that. And that ability, that perfects that experience. There's such an infinite palette of wines in terms of smells and tastes, if you think about it as an artist. The ability to freely explore it, to make sure that every glass you have is exactly what it is that you want, and you're drinking intentionally, and you're not drinking more than you want to because the bottle's open. All of those things are possible once you separate the volume they sell it to you from the volume you consume. That's the freedom that I really promote with Coravin. And it's the thing that got me so fired up about this prototype when I made it 24 years ago. Tested it for 12 years before starting a company. By the time I started Coravin, my life had completely changed. I thought about wine so differently than my friends because it didn't matter anymore. I'm a big fan of this movement toward drinking less but better. And that comes from being able to find that perfect wine for you, for a friend. And they can be different, or a spouse. Jen can have a different wine than I do. She might want a white Burgundy and I might want a Riesling, right? And we have that freedom, and there's no compromise, there's no arguing.
So you have changed my mindset, and for our listener, you can look at Corvin no longer as a product. I liked your framing or reframing that it's not a wine preserver
Yeah,
either. And it feels, and I hear you saying that it enables this completely different philosophy around wine enjoyment, having that perfect glass at the perfect moment and not losing anything because you chose to do so. And I'd love to frame out what I've heard are some of the pillars. One being that sustainability element and the elimination of waste. For me, it doesn't happen a lot because I feel compelled
right.
to finish the glass or finish the bottle, even if I'm ready for bed, but I just don't want it to go bad because it was so delicious. And so that environmental waste gives me anxiety. And from a point of transitioning your mindset around using Coravin, are there any key points around that sustainability that you've gotten feedback on, or that you are encouraging potential consumers to make that mindset shift?
Absolutely. And we think about sustainability a lot. The first CEO of Coravin, I'm founder, I'm chairman of the board, but I'm not CEO, and I haven't been because I'm a medical device guy. The first CEO was the CEO of Keurig. And when you think about Keurig, they can go to the moon and back 6 or 7 times with the unrecyclable plastic. And so we thought very hard about sustainability from the beginning, and we minimize our carbon footprint in a bunch of different ways because I think that is really important to this planet. And wine is such a natural product. It's been with us forever. And you would think that, grapevines are pulling carbon out of the air. And so it's got to be net positive. The reality is that making the wine, using barrels, doing everything they do in the winery to make it as great as it is, then bottling it, labeling and a closure, then shipping it. Largest part of the carbon footprint of wine is the shipping of it, which is not insignificant because it's a temperature controlled product. It's important to keep it cool. So shipping also is using electricity and whatever it is to transport. And then, keeping it cold. And then you pull the cork, you drink half the bottle, and you're either drinking the other half because you have to or you throw it out. Imagine all that work to get that bottle to you. And then you're throwing away half of the work for nothing or cooking with it, right? And so I think Coravin certainly helps in that in terms of waste reduction. The other part is our capsules are recyclable. So they're valuable metal, put them in your recycling stream. That's important. The other thing that came out of medical devices was the durability of Coravin. There's a wonderful test that I learned about in medicine called 6 feet onto concrete. And it's a military spec where you take the product and drop it from 6 feet onto concrete. And it's got to survive. And so we made Coravin to survive the restaurant world. And one of the ways we reduce our carbon footprint is by having it not fail. Our return rate on Coravin is sub 1%. So it's a really important thing that we put a lot of thought into. The whole, how do we net contribute to sustainability using?
I hadn't thought about just the sheer breakage, and your return rates are very impressive at less than a percent. So shifting gears to the second pillar, I personally think Corvin can inspire is I'm passionate about getting the younger generation to rethink wine. And one of the reasons I believe it's a struggle is they've grown up in an arena where everything is in that single serving size, whether it's a seltzer or a can of beer or going to a bar or a club and getting a single cocktail. None of those translates to this 750 milliliter 5 glass bottle of wine. Are you seeing Coravin, or is one of the goals and maybe future development areas of Coravin to bring a product or to bring them into your customer group because of the ability to drink less and have that single serving size by using a Coravin?
I think so. So I've got two sons, 26 and 29, and they grew up with Coravin. So they both have wine fridges and Coravins, and the way that, so they're not a good test sample. One of the things that I do see them do is they bring out wines to their friends. They have a pile of wine glasses. They put a bunch of bottles on the table. They teach them how to use Coravin, and they're like, go explore. And I think that freedom really helps. Wine is intimidating because of its variety. There's 140,000 different wines bottled every year, and prices go from anything from $1.50 to $2 for a bottle up to $10,000 per bottle. And so how do you learn about something that is so impenetrable? One of the ways is start at inexpensive wine, go find a great wine store, and with a person that you like and trust, find a wine that you love, and don't stop there. If you love a wine, go back to that same wine store and say, I love this. What else do you have that's like this, that's different? And explore wine. It's meant to be explored, and it's a lifetime of joy when you do. There are some huge unlocks left in the world of wine. You're right. Everything else is single serve, and wine is hampered by this. Other alternative formats for wine, whether it's bag-in-box, Tetra Pak, cans, all fail faster. They're not designed for long-term aging. If you could solve single-serve wine, inexpensive packaging, long-duration shelf life, single-serve, worked with every kind of wine, it would be huge. We've taken a crack at it with something that we call Vinitas, but that's still using glass and a normal closure. I would love to... my dream is to go to a wine store, talk to that same person that's advising you on the wine, and have them say, buy 6 cans of these 6 different wines, single serve. I know that would damage my Coravin sales, but I'm always looking to eliminate myself. What a joy that would be, how quickly you could learn about Burgundy, right? How quickly you could learn about Cabernet from around the world if you could buy it in single serve.
I agree. And I get asked all the time, especially when I am telling friends, hey, we're going here. Obviously, a bottle of wine isn't necessarily going to be the right thing to drink. So we don't have to give up wine altogether. We just have to find it in a different, more transportable or environmentally friendly packaging, because breaking glass at the swimming pool is not a good thing. But their immediate answer is always, there aren't any good wines in a can. And I say, oh, yes, there are.
Yeah.
But it's definitely going back to what we talked about earlier, that cultural shift. Instead of pulling a cork using a Coravin, well, instead of buying a bottle, buy a can. It's a big one. Well, the last pillar, you've touched on this several times today, Greg, is that pillar around empowerment. as you're talking to somebody who's maybe never heard of Coravin, which I don't know how many of those people are out there, but there are probably still some. But can you share how you would encourage any wine lover to leverage Coravin not as a gadget, but really as the perfect tool for gaining more value, personal experience out of their wine cellar if they have 5 bottles, 6 bottles, or if they have 5,000 bottles?
Yeah, I always I think of it in two ways. One is if you're learning about wine, it's the fastest way to learn because now you can taste six different wines side by side like you're at a wine show. If you own 6 bottles of 6 different Chardonnay, you can try all 6 side by side, and there's nothing like tasting side by side to learn what it is that makes that a California Chardonnay, an Oregon Chardonnay, a Burgundy, an Australian, and then, within each of these regions, the different types of wines that are there. So I think from an exploration learning standpoint, Coravin is a wonderful tool to use to learn. And we get a lot of letters from people that have become master sommeliers or masters of wine thanking us for Coravin. We tipped the scales in Cambridge University against Oxford in their blind wine tasting competition. We gave a bunch of Coravin to Cambridge. I don't know why I chose them on their side, but they've been winning of late, which is great. So you can learn and study and explore wine more freely. And then the other one is if you already know a lot about wine and you have all of these different wines, it's that freedom to have perfection, really, your perfect wine for that evening, that moment, and your spouse can have a different one, and your friend can have a different one. So you're able to sort of show up. People always say, is Coravin a solo device, something that is used by people that are not sharers, right? And I say, no, it allows you to share more. Your guest comes over, you've got a great wine cellar. Don't serve them one bottle of wine. Serve them 5 different wines. Show them this incredible world that wine is. You have this library. You can let them read any book, right? You can a bunch of different wines for them to explore and experience. In the end, one of the wonderful things about wine is that olfactory smell, taste thing, and its linkage to memory. And I believe that just at a great restaurant, if you're a wine collector and you've got a great cellar, you have the ability to create an unforgettable moment for a friend, a guest, your spouse, and yourself, because you can explore a variety of different tastes and wines at the same time. And that leads to this memory and this linkage that of this great wine with this great experience, which is what wine's all about. So I think if you're new to wine, use Coravin as a tool to explore. If you're deep into wine, you use it as a means of basically showing your cellar to other people, including yourself.
Think the idea of I love teaching people, don't just grab a bottle of Chardonnay. That gives you a singular frame of reference. Just as you mentioned, Greg, the concept of the Coravin allowing, whether you're just a wine enthusiast wanting to hone in on the perfect style of Chardonnay for you, or if you're studying to gain a certification, it's very daunting and almost impossible to want to sit down and pick 3 bottles of Chardonnay, a Burgundy, a Napa, and an Australian,
Yeah.
and taste them side by side. You've allowed that experience to happen because the Coravin allows you to put those bottles right back where they were, no harm, no foul, and have that side by side tasting experience. So it's allowing you not only to be more deliberate in how you're tasting wines, be more adventurous if you're doing that because you're not really certain or you want to explore a new region versus the one that you always go to. If you always go to Napa, this allows you to potentially do a Napa beside someplace you never would have purchased a Chardonnay, maybe Northern Italy, or create those flights, as you mentioned, and have a 5-course meal and have a 5-course wine flight that's perfectly paired rather than saving those bottles just for a special occasion. Or in my case, often I've saved them too long and they're
Mm.
no longer as magical as they might have been if I just would have used a Coravin 5 years ago.
It's that there's so much to learn in wine, and I think that's what makes it intimidating. If there's a way that Coravin can be used to pull that down and get rid of that intimidation and liberate the person to freely explore and learn on at their own pace with the wines that they get. My advice to friends when they're new to wine is don't go to a wine store and buy one bottle. Go to a wine store and buy three. Then have a Coravin and taste them side by side and learn, I like this one better than this one because of this. And then as soon as you know the because of this, you can go back to that wine store and say, I like this in a wine. Do you have others that are like that have that feature? I mean, honestly, that I'm still learning, but I'm not intimidated anymore by that learning. I don't have waste. The only waste I have is, what do you do with a Coravin bottle that you don't like? And I'm trying to be honest with people saying, I personally don't like this wine, but I want you to try it.
The beauty of wine. What I like, you might not like, and vice versa. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad wine. That's what I tell
Right.
people all the time. It doesn't mean that it's a bad wine. It just means it's not your style or your spouse's or your best friend's style. So you shouldn't make your judgments based upon someone else's perspective.
Right.
And the beauty of it is, in the world of popping a cork, if you didn't like it, it would just sit and go bad. In the beauty of a Coravin world, you can give that to someone else and give that wine a second opportunity to be somebody's new favorite wine.
That's it. Cilantro's not a bad spice. It's just not everybody likes it, right? I mean, I love cilantro. I know people who hate cilantro, and so it's the same with wine. Very personal. Don't let anyone tell you that a wine is great, and don't let anyone tell you a wine is bad. If you like it, it's good.
Whether it's $5 or 500, that's what I tell
That's
people all the time. So, Greg, looking forward, are there any trends or any initiatives on the forefront that are a focus area for you at Coravin that might change the game in a different way?
There's certainly trends. Wine consumption is falling, and alcohol consumption is falling, and falling fast around the world. I work in healthcare. I recognize that excessive consumption of wine certainly can lead to health problems. I believe that people are going to continue to shift toward drinking less but better, drinking what's better, what you love, but only drinking the amount of it that you want, not the volume of sale. I think the other thing that's happening is, I hope we're reaching a peak in terms of pricing. Like, the prices have just are so high for so many wines, and they've gone up and up and up and up, and that's just not sustainable. And it certainly is going to scare away the younger generation, right? And that is not a survivable business model. So I'm hoping that wine prices peak and maybe even come down a bit, although tariffs in the United States are going to make that tough. So I see a continued either leveling or slight decline in wine going on, and I'm hoping the price comes down a little bit. And what that's meant for Coravin is, we're sort of riding a wave that is pointed in our direction, or we're going with. Our sales are up, even though wine consumption is down. And I think that's because by the glass is increasing. It's going to mean a lot to the wineries. I worry for them, because there's going to be there's a lot of inventory sitting around if they're not selling, and the prices are too high and the consumption is going down. So they're really in a bit of a bind. What is Coravin going to do as a result of this? Less but better. I want available everywhere, and I want less but better available not only in your home or in the restaurant through a Coravin system, but I want it available at retail. Why do you have to commit to a full bottle of wine before you know whether or not you like it? It would be great if two things happened. One, that wine retailers that still have a physical footprint
Mm-hmm.
taste people on wine, more and better wine, before they have to buy. So if Total Wine and Spirits in the United States does use Coravin quite a bit to taste people on wine. Harrods in London uses Coravin to taste people on wine before they buy. That is the ultimate experience, to be able to taste through 4 or 5 different wines you're thinking about buying, and then saying, okay, I'm going to buy that one and this one because I really like those. Now you know, right? So I want to see more use of Coravin in the wine store. It's the only reason to go to a wine store, is to talk to somebody knowledgeable or taste something to find out whether you like it. The other thing I'd like to see is more alternative formats that work effectively and that do sell in single serve, higher quality wines. I think that's going to take the generation of a new container. That's a lot of hard work. Either we're going to be part of that hard work, or somebody else will solve it. If there was a shelf stable, by the glass, long shelf life, not interfering with the quality of the beverage container that was rapidly recyclable, I would love it. Because I think it's going to get more people to consider wine as, if they're drinking alcohol, it's the right alcohol. It's the experience they want to have. I love this industry and I love this beverage. And so I want to see it survive in an environment where overall consumption is going down and prices are too high. How do we fractionalize the cost of the price into buy the glass in something that's delicious in a single serve container? I would love to see us be part of that. And then there's 10 or 15 other things that I would love to do with Coravin. You'll be seeing more and more in coming years.
I'm excited to see what's coming in the coming years. Kind of to wrap up, Greg, there's a few new elements of Coravin in my mind that you've solidified for our listener to consider. One is the exploration element. This device, Coravin, allows you, without the risk of all these bottles going bad or the fear or anxiety over having to finish each bottle, to have a much broader experience, either every day, a little bit every day, or if you really want to taste across multiple bottles, you can now do that very, very easily. It also opens the door for more interesting by the glass programs, both at restaurants and wine bars. And to your point, I think the element I hadn't really even thought about was going more into and encouraging wine shops to leverage Coravin to give customers a potential exploration in store before making that significant commitment, especially if they're newer to wine and really have no idea where they want to go. Dropping $30 or $40 on a bottle and discovering you don't like it at all is not going to encourage people to continue to explore within the, what you say, 30,000 different bottles
Yeah.
globally of wines available. So those are some key pillars for Coravin I hadn't really thought about. And I'm also completely shifting away from Coravin as a preservation into Coravin is enabling this whole new world of wine exploration beyond the single bottle and that single cork is king mentality.
Yeah, that's my hope. When I founded Coravin, I had that freedom already. I didn't need to found the company to solve my problem. I wanted, as an inventor, an entrepreneur, to get to provide that freedom to as many others as possible. I believe wine contributes substantially to quality of life. It really does. Exactly what you said. To come home and relax with a great glass. That is part of the joy of life. Connecting a smell with an experience. That is part of the joy of life and how memories are created in a restaurant and at home. My dream was providing that freedom to as many people as possible. And I part of the reason I evangelize about Coravin is not because I want to interfere with a culture of pulling a cork, which we still do, even at Coravin. It's to add to that culture. You can still pull corks. Now you can also do this. It's in addition, not in replacement. So it adds to your overall wine experience. You already have your wine experience that you're familiar with. How do you expand that experience with a new tool that gives you this freedom? My CEO looked at me recently. Dave's wonderful. He said, we're serving more than a glass a second through a Coravin. Every second of every day. There's about 1 million people every 10 days that experience Coravin glass. And if you think about all of those moments that we've hopefully contributed to in a positive way for at least one person in that situation, if not multiple, that's the reason you found a company. And could not be happier with the outcome. And I think people have come to understand that it's not just preservation, it's this freedom.
And wrapping it up, when you brought it down to, would you say 25, 30 cents a glass on the economic side, that's game changing math in my book, because I would spend 25, 30, a dollar or more to be able to open some of the bottles I've been saving and to share those experiences, not only with my spouse, but also with friends. Well, this has been such an educational discussion. I've learned so much. I now can think of a lot of different ways that I want to get that Coravin tool improving my wine experience. And for our listeners, I hope this is giving you some great ways to expand your journey without feeling like every single time you have to pop the cork and consume that full bottle. So Greg, this has been just really, really valuable.
Well, thank you, Krista. I really appreciate it. And cheers and drink a good health.
I learned so much from Greg today, and you can learn more at Coravin.com. I've put the link in the show notes. But my biggest takeaway is those special bottles I've been saving are not doing me any good just sitting there, and neither are yours. The best occasion is to drink it tonight, even if it's just for a taste or a glass. I'd love for you to share your experiences, either with that bottle that got away or how you are leveraging your Coravin to transform your own wine experiences. So go to Instagram and follow me at Christy Everyday Sommelier. That's Kristi Everyday Sommelier. And DM me or tag me in a post with your favorite bottle of wine you've been saving and how Coravin transformed your experience. And if you want to take the next step and further get involved with the Wine Wise and Everyday Sommelier community, go to my website at wine-wise, wize.com, and make sure you sign up for the insiders list. Now, in our next episode, we are covering a mystery. We are solving crimes and we are diving into counterfeit wines. What are they? And how do you know you're buying the real deal? Until then, grab a glass of your favorite wine and continue to learn wine your way.